Item number 2, declarations of interest. To receive any declaration of interest from members in accordance with Part 2, Paragraph 9 of the Members' Code of Conduct and declarations under protocols of the Regulatory Committee Property Code. Is there any declarations? No? Thank you. And to approve the minutes or confirmation of the minutes of the Licensing Act 2003 meeting held on the 12th of February 21. Can I have confirmation of that? Is that okay? Even though members that are here, the members that were on that meeting, Councillor Green and McDonald will confirm that they are a true record of the meeting. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, Chair. Can we get a vote if in favour? Yeah.
All in favour, please. Councillor Morris seems to have vanished.
Oh yes, it's back again. It's just joining.
Councillor Morris, we were just doing a vote on the minutes of the 12th of February, just taking a vote. All in favour? Thank you. Item 4, Licensing Act 2003, Mama's International Food Mart, Unit 12, Westgate Shopping Park in Basildon. And I think we can do the introductions now. I'm Councillor Lawrence, Chairman of the Licensing Committee. I'm joined by Councillors Kevin Wingfield, who is the Vice Chair, and also Councillor Don Morris. Can we go round? Is that okay? Just to go round, just to introduce everybody, so I know who everyone is. We've got the solicitor.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Miss Smith. I'm the solicitor within the litigation team at Basildon Council.
My name is Andrew Morrell. I'm a solicitor acting for the applicant GPR Essex Limited, which to all intents and purposes is Priya Matthew, who is on the screen.
I'm Priya Matthew. I am the director of the GPR Essex Limited.
Thank you.
My name is Roy Robinson. I'm a licensing officer.
Good morning. I'm Olukemi Faloye. I'm a senior governance officer for the council. I'm taking today's notes.
Graham.
Good morning, Chair Graham Hopkins, the objector.
Thank you. We've also got senior and governance and the other legal officer here as well. Thank you, everyone. Lindsay, do you want to outline the procedure?
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for agreeing to take part in the committee via Zoom today. I think everybody has their names typed so that we know who everybody is, which is great. Thank you. Can I also ask that you turn off any noise sources in the background, radios, televisions, or if you're watching the meeting, if you can have that muted as well so we don't get any feedback, as well as any smart speakers are turned off to ensure that they don't inadvertently turn themselves on and start recording or anything. Participants will be asked to speak at the requisite time, and if you can just ensure that you're muted when you're not speaking, please, just to obviously prevent any interruptions for those that are speaking. And we have the raise the hand function. Hopefully everybody's got that, but if not, obviously we've got the chat function if you do need to sort of interject at any time. So I'm just going to run through how the hearing will sort of the process that it will follow today. So the applicant or their representative will be invited to open their case and then call any witnesses and give state what they need to say. Then questions can be asked of those witnesses by the objector, members, etc. Then the objector will be able to speak and make their representations, and again they can be asked questions. And then there'll be closing statements from both parties. The objector will go first, licensing applicant or their representative will go last, and then everybody will be asked to leave the meeting and go back into the waiting area while members deliberate, so that you can be given the decision today. Is there any questions around the process that we're going to follow that anybody would like to raise? No, okay, I'll pass back to Councillor Lawrence then. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll start with the presentation of the case. So, licensing officer to present his reports, and we'll hand over to Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Chairman. On the 27th of April 2021, the licensing authority received an application for a premises licence from Miss Priya Matthew on behalf of GPR Essex Limited. The application and premises plan, including enclosure number 2, relates to Unit 12 Westgate Shopping Park, Basildon, and has been accepted as being properly made. The application has been advertised in accordance with the relevant regulations. An area location plan is attached to enclosure 3. The application is for a premises licence authorising the sale of alcohol for consumption off the premises. The requested hours for the licensable activity are the sale of alcohol for Monday to Sunday, 0800 hours to 000 hours midnight. Open hours of the premises Monday to Sunday, 0700 hours to 0000 hours midnight. The premises licence, if granted, will contain the relevant mandatory conditions as required by the legislation, and those conditions are offered in the applicant's operating schedule, and those agreed with Essex Police, which are enclosure number 4. During the statutory 28-day consultation period, the licensing authorities received 1 representation. A copy of the representation is attached at enclosure number 5. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Okay, we will now go questions to the licensing officer. First of all, from the applicant or the solicitor for the applicant, Mr. Murrell.
Sorry, yes. Yes, I have no questions for Mr. Robinson.
Thank you very much. Members? No? And just the legal officer for any clarifications? No?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we move on now to the individual or his representative we've got here to present the case. Thank you, Mr. Murrell.
I'm happy to make the application, but I thought that your solicitor said that the process was for the objector to go first. Is that how you want to do it?
No. Sorry, yourself. You're the applicant first.
Objector later.
The objector will go up first in terms of summing up, but not in terms of this stage.
Oh, right. Okay. Apologise. That's fine. So as you've heard, this is an application for a premises licence for Unit 12 Westgate Shopping Park in Basildon. It's to be known as Mama International Food Mart. The application is made by a limited company, GPR Essex Limited, but that's owned and operated by Mrs. Priya Matthew. She is an existing licensee in Basildon and has operated and run an off-licence premises on the same hours as proposed today at 14 Southern Hay. And those premises have a licence from 8 AM to 12 midnight. She has run that premises for the last 6 years, and we say that that's a very persuasive and supportive evidence in support of today's application. The premises that she intends to open at 12 Westgate Shopping Park is a similar one to her other one at 14 Southern Hay. It's going to be an international convenience store. And I understand that the wet sales or alcohol sales will be about 20% of what's sold, and dry sales for other goods about 80%. So in other words, it's not a dedicated off license. It is primarily a food store, but with an off license provision. The intention is to employ about 4 or 5 staff, part-time and full-time in the premises. I gather that it will take about 1 month for her, once or if the license is granted, to fit out the premises and to start to operate. In terms of my client, as I say, she's an established licensee in the borough, and in terms of operating the premises, her existing premises, she has been subject to test purchasing, which I'm sure the committee is familiar with, and she's passed both the test purchases that have been made of her premises. There's been no major incidents at her current premises, and I say, as the applicant solicitor, that applicants can tell committees all sorts of things, but the reality is that actions speak louder than words. And when we came before this committee 6 years ago, we said how it would be run, and true to her word, Mrs. Matthew has run that premises as she said she would, without incident, and in fact she has run it fastidiously in terms of the law, and there's been no difficulty with that premises. And that's perhaps why today before you don't have any objections to this application from any of the responsible authorities, and in particular the police, obviously the experts on crime and disorder, and they have put forward a raft of conditions they wish to see attached to the licence, and I think they appear in your pack at page 42, and I don't think it serves for me to read through those in detail, but you'll see that all those conditions are those which are best practice for licensed premises, off licensed premises, including the CCTV provisions, the use, employing an incident log, Challenge 25 scheme, a refusals book, and also training of staff, paragraph 5, and then notices with regard to alerting customers to keeping noise to a minimum when leaving the premises. Obviously, my client volunteered a number of conditions, and I think the police ones mirror or perhaps overlap with the ones my client has volunteered with the application. And again, if I can refer you to page 25 of your pack, you'll see under the various 4 licensing objectives under each heading, you'll see the various conditions which are volunteered with this application today. I mean, it's my submission that the application before you today is a modest one. It's a reasonable one. It's certainly one where, if one would expect it to cause any difficulty for responsible authorities, primarily I suppose the police, but even the licensing authority itself can raise objection, but there is no representation or objection from any of those responsible authorities. We do obviously have one objection from Mr. G. Hopkins, who I understand is a resident, and by coincidence, I believe he objected to my client's application 6 years ago for the 14 Southern Hay premises. Well, I don't know what the connection, if there is any, in regard to that. This premises obviously is not in a quiet backwater, it's in the centre of Basildon, and we feel that the conditions have been put forward amply demonstrate that the 4 licensing objectives are being suitably promoted, which is what an applicant is supposed to demonstrate. But as I said earlier, obviously the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and it will only be a case of once the premise is up and running, when one can see whether the licensee is abiding by her conditions and applying the law. And as I say, she's demonstrated that already, and therefore I believe that there's a lot of confidence in my client from the responsible authorities, and indeed the licensing authority wearing their objector hat. We see obviously the concerns of the objector. However, those concerns were raised 6 years ago on the other premises that my client has, and I'm pleased to say that those fears were not brought to fruition, and that my client was able to operate her premises, very well and without difficulty. So I think it is important to look at my client's track record, and that should be borne very much in light taken on board today. If my client is wrong about all that she says with her application, there is, of course, very stringent measures which the police can take in terms of closure orders and other techniques, for example, review. And I'm sure the committee is aware that without cost and at any time, any party, for example, any interested person or responsible authority can call in the license for review if matters are not being progressed as they should be, or if there's difficulties in the operating of the premises. So again, it's a very important point in favour of a grant of the application as made today. The committee, I'm sure, is familiar with the Section 182 guidance under the government's guidance to licensing authorities, and I would just highlight to you one aspect of that, if I may, which is at paragraph 10.15, and it states in terms that shops, stores, supermarkets should normally be free to provide sales of alcohol for consumption off the premises at any times when the retail outlet is open for shopping, unless there are good reasons based on the licensing objectives restricting those hours. In other words, if this was a 24-hour store, then they should be able to operate an off license for 24 hours. That obviously isn't the case here, and the application is sought from 8 a.m. to 12 midnight, 7 days a week. Now, the store actually is open for 1 hour earlier than that, and commences at 7 a.m. So that's paragraph 10.15 of the Home Office guidance to licensing authorities. The guidance also says that the experts on crime and disorder are for the police, and it's obviously clear, as I've said earlier, that the police don't have a difficulty with this application before you today. It's not our client's experience that street drinking will increase, or there will be antisocial behaviour as a result of this licence being granted. There obviously are already a number of off licences in the vicinity, and the difficulties are caused through poor operators rather than grants of licence. And I think my client can safely be said to be a good operator, and she's clearly demonstrated that. So as I said earlier, we don't feel that any of the issues that have been alluded to by the objector are likely to take place, and that's been borne out in the previous experience with their other premises. So I think there is an element of speculation there. And in fact, of course, until my client's premises opens, there is no evidence against this premises in terms of that it is causing problems. And as I say, there's lots of safeguards that if that was to occur in the future, that appropriate action can be taken. So I think the conditions also that I think the objector has sought to impose, we feel would be very disproportionate and unreasonable. If one looks at the guidance to licensing committees under paragraph 10.10, you will see that committees shouldn't impose conditions which amount to a general policy. It seems to me that the conditions which the objector has asked for would amount to that, and one has to have a level playing field. Mrs. Matthews' license at 14 Southernhay doesn't have those restrictive conditions on them, which would obviously amount to a restraint of trade, and we just don't feel that those types of measures would be appropriate. And as I say, if it turned out that we're wrong about what we're saying today, there's ample steps that can be taken by the licensing authorities or objectors, interested persons, to take corrective action. So we're not happy to agree to the conditions that the interested person has suggested might be imposed today. My clients did send me this morning a list of a recent list, refusals log. I emailed it to Mr. Robinson. I appreciate it's very late in the day, but it's effectively from an exercise book, but you can see the dates and the product and the description of the person and the reason for refusal. So this is obviously shows due diligence by my client that she is fastidiously applying the law. And if there are young people coming in trying to buy cigarettes or alcohol, they're taking the appropriate steps on the Challenge 25. And there's, as I say, there's dozens of examples there where no ID has been produced, and we feel that obviously shows the standard of my client in applying in the law. In terms of the operating of the premises, as I say, it's going to be an international food store, and a customer wants to come into that store and be able to buy a basket of items, be it food products, and with that, if they want alcohol, they would be able to buy alcohol. And if a license wasn't granted, obviously that would mean that the customer would have to go elsewhere for their alcohol products, which would be a retrograde step. And it's going to be a specialist food store, so all various international cuisines, so foodstuffs that you wouldn't be able to get from your Sainsbury's and Tesco's and the main supermarkets. So I think that's important to bear in mind. My client did send me a list of points that she wanted to make to you today, but I think I have covered most of them in my comments to you. There's a reference to high strength beer as the interested person saying that he wanted to have some sort of restriction on that. But again, none of the other off licenses, as far as we're aware, have that kind of restriction. And again, it effectively is a restraint of trade. And if this was something that the government was in favour of, then there would be guidance on this. But importantly, there isn't such guidance, and I don't think it's appropriate or proportionate to have such a restrictive condition on the strength of alcohol that's sold, nor on the quantities of alcohol. I think there was an indication that sales of alcohol had to be at least 4 cans at a time, but again, we're not aware. It's certainly not something that my client has on our other store at 14 Southernhay, and it's something that we would be very much opposed to being imposed today. Chair, I think that amounts to most of the comments that I've got to make in favour of the application today. Obviously, I reserve, I suppose, the right to make further comments as a conclusion, but I'm trying to keep it relatively short and hopefully sweet, but obviously I can answer any questions that the committee have.
Thank you, Mr. Murrell.
On what I've said.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murrell. Okay, then questions then. The licensing officer got any questions?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, any members? Any questions? No?
Not this time.
Sorry. No, okay. Any legal officer for clarification? No? Okay, we'll move on then to Mr. Hopkins, who's put in an objection.
Yes, Chair, and thank you very much. Let me just say at the outset, there's no connection with objections to the previous application, but of course the panel will be aware, Chair, that this application must be considered purely on its own merits. I take Mr. Murrell's comments on board, but of course the Licensing Act, unlike most acts of Parliament, looks forward. And you'll be aware that there has been case law, as far as I'm aware, that allows some degree of speculation because it does look forward. And frequently we are dealing with premises, Chair, that are not open for trade or to the public, provided there is evidence. Well, I think the evidence speaks for itself. I take it Mr. Murrell doesn't live in Basildon. I do. As at last weekend, there was, following the article in the Echo about the PSPO not being in force at the moment, an increase in street drinking. In fact, on Sunday afternoon when we popped in, there were quite a few street drinkers in the town centre. The other place they like to congregate is between the new college and Iceland. As at Sunday afternoon, we saw a gentleman outside Iceland's who couldn't even stand up. He was that drunk and abusive. He just staggered across the pavement down towards the bus garage. My fear is, Chair, that you'll see from the representation that with the welcome redevelopment of our town centre, which having been here 7 years, I thoroughly welcome and look forward to the new cinema, etc., and the restaurants. What I don't want to see is with new residents moving into the town centre and bringing our town centre into the 21st century, and I'm sure you don't, I don't want to see an increase in street drinkers abusing in that new square, excuse me, in the new square between Iceland's and the college, where the students will be shortly, having to mix with street drinkers. Now, it's quite clear at the moment, somebody in Basildon is, a shop, not a pub, a shop is supplying the street drinkers. I, for my part, will be trying to see where they're getting it from while I'm in the town. And if I have to, I will bring a review of that premises. But that is no comment against this lady's application, nor indeed against the welcome new shop. My concerns are the effect on new residents and existing residents, those in Southern Hay and in Brook House, and the effect on visitors to our town centre of having an increasing number of rather, shall we say, obnoxious people who are drunk all the time and quite early in the day. I'm not asking, I don't think, unreasonable measures. We're asking that you look at the measures that can be taken, and I would suggest, I mean, I've reduced it from a request for outright refusal to lesser hours, not so much in the morning. My main concern is 12 o'clock at night, which I think is ridiculous. And with the cinema turning up perhaps at that time, of restaurants in East Square, that could lead to people, perhaps even with still got children out, teenage children in particular, seeing all these drunks hanging around. We just don't want them. So I'm asking you to reduce the hours. I would be happy at a bottom line at 11 o'clock, which seems to be eminently sensible. And the measures that I've asked for were, as the gentleman said, 4 cans or bottles. I would settle for no single cans or bottles. And nothing above the maximum strength of 6%. So I'm not so worried about bottles of spirits, but it's the beer, the cider and the lager that these men and women in the town centre are getting hold of from somewhere. They're not bringing them in, Chair, they're getting from somewhere in the town centre. Somebody who underneath it all is being somewhat irresponsible, I would say. We previously had an incident about 4 or 5 weeks ago in that square that I've mentioned, where I had to call the police because a woman was getting particularly abusive, and it started into a fight with one of the men she was drinking with. And I don't really want to have to do that every time I walk in the town centre and call the police. When the PSPO is brought back in, hopefully it will be, then obviously the police have got some powers to deal with it. But you don't often see it happening, which is no disrespect to our police service. They've got other things to do, but it's just setting the scenario that we're facing in the town centre. I want to see the town, and I'm sure most of Basildon does, want to see the town move forward, not have young children and elderly or vulnerable people have to witness these people, and maybe ask the shopkeepers to bear, some responsibility for who they're selling to. I did note when Mr. Murrell mentioned it and referred to the list, the refusals list from the lady's other shop, he referred to underage, etc., or ID. There was no mention of any refusals for people being intoxicated already. And I would suggest that the people we've seen, my partner and I have seen over the last few weeks, are literally heavily intoxicated. The language indicates that, the fact they can't walk straight, etc., and their other performance. I mean, I've had a pub myself in the past, so I know what drunk people look like. So that's the point I would like to make to the panel, and ask you to, let's let the shop go forward. No problem with that. Let's let the lady have a drinks license, alcohol license, but with measures in place, Chair, to address the issues that your residents, your future town centre residents in particular, may face, and those who want to go and enjoy the new cinema and the new facilities the council is promoting. We want to see it to be a success and not ruined by drunk and intoxicated people. That's really all I want to say, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Do we have any questions to Mr. Hopkins from the licensing officer, members, or the applicant's representative?
None from me.
Yes, I would like to ask a question, please.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Hopkins, would you agree that the police are the experts in relation to crime and disorder?
Yes, with a caveat, but as a resident of this town and a frequent visitor to the town centre several times a week, I have the right, of course, to express my opinion and my observations. And I will say, for the record, I'm a former licensing officer for a London borough. So I'm one of those who, in the past, could have objected. So yes, I come with some experience. I'm not just a lay person.
But given that you accept that the police are the experts in crime and disorder, and indeed the licensing authority itself wearing its hat as an objector can also raise objections, why do you think those parties haven't objected to today's application?
I can't guess that, can I? I can't answer that. You need to ask them that question. That's a matter for licensing and for the police. What I can tell you is what I see on the ground is that every time I'm there, you never see a police officer moving on the people who are already drunk or taking any action due to the pressure of COVID, no doubt, and everything else, following up where these people are getting the drink from. So I'm afraid shopkeepers, and the Act provides for that, as you very well know, Mr. Murrell, the Act provides and the objectives provide for shopkeepers to be held responsible, not just for their customers, but for what happens afterwards. That's my answer on that.
But could it be, though, Mr. Hopkins, that actually this is quite a modest and reasonable application, and that the 4 licensing objectives are going to be adequately promoted by the various conditions and steps that are being put in place, and that being borne out by my client's previous demonstration of this through her other application 6 years ago,
well,
which she still runs.
Can I point out to you via the chair, Mr. Murrell, that of course this application must be considered purely on its own merits. That's in the guidance and it's in the law. So we can't take that other shop into account. And I ask the panel to disregard the lady's existing shop as they're required to do under the guidance. I'm sure their legal officer will advise them. It is, I do not consider, I would not have made the representation if I considered the objectives were going to be fully met. The evidence is on the ground of what's happening in our town centre and what we want for the future of our town centre. I do not consider that the current conditions, particularly the lack of a maximum strength and wanting to sell alcohol till 12 o'clock, is necessarily a responsible operator. So the answer to your question is no, I don't.
Right. And can you confirm whether you've made objections to any other application for off licence?
I would say that's a matter for me to know and the licensing officer to know. With this application, as I repeat, must be considered on its own merits, so that point is irrelevant. Yes, I did object to the lady's original application, but we're not looking at that application. This is a new application and by law must be considered on its own merits.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, we'll move on to summing up. So we'll ask the objector to go first, please.
Nothing further really to add, Chair, other than what I've said. The evidence that my partner and I see on the ground, that somebody must be serving it. And it seems responsible to me, as a number of London boroughs do, to put measures in place to prevent the problem getting worse. I wish the lady well with her new shop, but I still think the measure, particularly with the 11 o'clock terminal hour and the 6% maximum strength and no single cans, would be a way forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Mr. Robinson?
No comment from me, Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Murrell?
Thank you. Yes, I basically would just like to reiterate the points that I made initially, that I feel that what you have before you is a very reasonable and modest application, which is eminently suitable to be granted. I don't agree with the objector in terms that you must not look at the previous track record of the applicant. I think that's nonsense. It's extremely important to look at who's the applicant before you, because, as I said earlier, actions speak louder than words. We can say all sorts of things today, but in reality, it's what people do on the ground, and they must be judged by their past performance. And Priya Matthew has demonstrated a huge ability as a licensee for over 6 years, which is no mean feat. And indeed, I'm sure a huge amount of confidence has been given to the police by seeing how Mrs. Matthew operates. And as I say, actions speak louder than words. What we say today is actually what's going to take place. And if we're wrong about all that, then there's massive powers to bring in the license for review, closure orders, and so on. If the police, who are the experts in Basildon for crime and disorder, really thought that this premises being granted today on the terms that it's been sought for was going to cause a problem, then they would have made representation, and they would be seeking these various conditions that have been put forward. They would be seeking different hours. The reality is that they haven't done that. And therefore, they're the experts, and we should listen to what they've said. They're happy with this application, and I really feel that the application should be granted today on the terms that have been applied for. And there's always the caveat and the ability to seek redress if things don't develop as we say they will do. But for all those reasons, I would ask the committee to grant the application today.
Thank you, Mr. Murrell. Members will now make their decision in private, so we will be putting you all back into the waiting room while we have a discussion.
Yeah, I will put you all in a waiting room and bring you back in once the decision has been made. Please bear with me. Okay. Yes.
Can someone stop
Yes,
the live
there are.
YouTube as well, please?
Yes, just a moment.